Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is a lot of movie. Some might say too big for little minds. 3 hours of it, if you're going by Zack Snyder's Ultimate Edition, as we are for this scene-by-scene analysis and breakdown of all the actually cool details Snyder and his team hid throughout this film. Because, like the closing shot, no Zack Snyder dream stays buried forever. The film opens with a black casket reflecting the autumn sky, the Wayne funeral, which in this movie is bookended by Superman's black casket in the closing shot, which is based on his silver shield on black resurrection suit in the comics. Snyder also features a close-up on a slow-mo smoky casing in both deaths, because both of them are a death in Bruce's family. Superman in this film tells him to bury it. And burying people is really all Bruce does. The cinema shows a poster for the Mark of Zorro, with the Wayne's death classically outside of Zorro's showing to inspire Bruce's future as a Black Mask vigilante. But here, it's Excalibur. Batman v Superman in many ways is a story of Arthur and Lancelot, rivals who team up against a common foe that one defeats via self-impalement. The mugger's gun snapping Martha's bead of pearls is lifted directly from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, Snyder's primary comic influence. Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohan, themselves rivals from The Walking Dead, play the slain Thomas and Martha. We will get to that safe word. I do love how one of Martha's pearls drops with Bruce later after he falls into the cave, suggesting that he kept one of her pearls from that murder and clung to it during the funeral. Bruce does clutch his pearls every time Superman breaks a city. The wanton destruction of Man of Steel's final act is reframed with grounded empathy as Bruce watches innocents suffer, and this battle is actually synced perfectly. The raining debris that Bruce glares up at is his own Wayne satellite that Zod threw down in the previous movie. And in the dusk, Bruce first sees a horse. Equine imagery recurs throughout this film.
Galloping through the streets to warn us.
While I ate my hero cake, their horses were drowning.
But there are actually 4 appearances by live horses. This one in Metropolis, and then later outside the Capitol, and then the 2 sets of horses escorting Superman's and Clark's caskets, each horse bringing death. And Snyder acknowledged this 4 horsemen of the apocalypse parallel as being intentional. This extended director's cut outright reveals Lois's colleague as
Jimmy Olsen, photographer.
Actually a CIA mole who doesn't last long. Anatoly Knyazov, aka Cap's attempted murderer and Winter Soldier, is the villain KG Beast in the comics. Kahina Ziri testifies for Senator Finch.
The world has been so caught up with what Superman can do that no one has asked what he should do.
Invoking my man, Dr. Ian Malcolm.
But your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Gotham cops watch Metropolis State running up the score on Gotham City, the way Superman runs up the hero score on Gotham's hero. Actually, cyborg actor Ray Fisher confirmed Gotham lost because their star player, Victor Stone, was out due to injury. And the dispatcher calls
Delta Charlie 27, do you copy?
Delta Charlie 27, a nod to DC Detective Comics issue 27, the comic debut of Batman. And in the streets of Gotham, they pass a sign for Joker's favorite bathhouse, Ace Chemicals, which shows up throughout this movie and in pretty much every DCEU movie forward. Bruce meets Alfred in the Batcave.
Funnel Ferry Butterbar, Funnel Ferry Butterbar, Funnel Ferry. There's nothing wrong with the microphone.
This Batman uses a voice modulator, a practical advancement for a famous billionaire to avoid his voice getting recognized. Then Alfred says,
You don't even know if he exists. It could be a phantasm.
Perhaps a nod to many's top Batman animated film, Mask of the Phantasm. But then Alfred stokes that paranoia.
Innocents die. That's how it starts. The fever, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel.
Damn, Jeremy Irons can deliver a line! But the audio mix is also great here. Between the Hans Zimmer Junkie XL new on-edge Batman theme, there's a little scream echoing after Innocents Die.
Innocents die.
As we talked about last week, Man of Steel was an immigrant story. The sequel flips that narrative to the other side of that. The suspicious old-timer who believes his turf is now threatened by the newcomer. Get off my lawn, you alien! You took a job! And these opening scenes do a great job making this story about fear of the newcomer. And that dual narrative is reflected in the 2 cities' media. Metropolis' Daily Planet writes puff pieces about Superman's heroics. Here, the Gotham Free Press glorifies the Bat brand of justice. Though later, Bruce suggests that I think he owns this paper.
Daily Planet. Wait, do I own this one? Or is that the other guy?
And then we meet
It's Cherry.
Jesse Eisenberg's take on Lex Luthor is polarizing, but that might be because Eisenberg was actually impersonating someone, screenwriter and similarly polarizing figure Max Landis, with whom Eisenberg had just worked on American Ultra, and Landis himself said that he saw the parallel, and others said that Eisenberg's later line was an exact mimicry of something they heard Landis say.
I love it. I love bringing people together. How are we?
On Wally Keith's crazy research wall is a depiction of Superman lifting a car, just like in his famous first appearance in Action Comics #1. Bruce tracks Knyzev to an underground fighting ring.
Good luck for one is always his brother's misfortune.
A little foreshadowing for Bruce's lucky survival of Doomsday at the misfortune of his brother. Lex shows his dad's painting to the Senator.
That should be upside down. The devils don't come from hell beneath us, no. No, they come from the sky.
And in the final minutes after his arrest, Lex actually does flip this painting upside down, reflecting the devils from the sky that are now thanks to him approaching. In Bruce's graveyard is a headstone to the right, which, if you zoom and enhance, or look at set photos, is the headstone of one Richard Grayson, whose Robin suit is kept in the Batcave, with graffiti implying the Joker had killed him. Bruce alludes to this later.
And we just have a bad history with freaks dressed like clowns.
Suicide Squad confirmed that Harley Quinn had a role in this as well. Recently, Snyder did confirm that that suit was that of Dick Grayson, not Jason Todd like in the Death in the Family comics. Though there are a number of theories that the DCEU Joker, Jared Leto, could have been a converted Tim Drake based on an interesting line later.
20 years in Gotham, Alfred. How many good guys are left? How many stayed that way?
Suggesting that many past allies, whether they're Dents or Kyles or Robins, might have turned corrupt over the years. Now listen closely as Bruce walks into the crypt. That sounds familiar. That's the Kryptonian world engine from the Black Zero event. Now, this sound haunts Bruce for all the lives that were lost on that day. Every time he dreams, you can hear it in the background. The stained glass behind him depicts the Archangel Michael casting Lucifer down to hell. Michael is in red and blue here, Superman's colors. Surrounding him are the flaming skyscrapers like those in Metropolis. So in this metaphor, Bruce would be the hell demon, the demon that jumps out at him. Like Lex, he sees this biblical art as upside down. And then at Lex's party, our first look at Diana Prince is scored with a subtle riff of her Wonder Woman theme.
Open bar. The end.
Lex references Greek mythology.
Prometheus went with us, and he ruined Zeus's plan to destroy mankind, and for that he was given a thunderbolt. True!
To Diana, this is not myth, Zeus is her father. The governor of New Jersey at this party is a cameo by Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow. They did shoot most of this movie in Michigan. Vermont Senator Pat Leahy actually cameos at the Senate hearing. He cameos in nearly every Batman film. The Dia de los Muertos celebrator's skull makeup reflects Superman drowning in the skulls in Man of Steel. This kind of worship is similarly smothering to him. Clark reads an article about Batman's brands being a death sentence at Blackgate, and at the bottom of the paragraph, the quote, "Who watches the Watchmen?" is a nod to Snyder's previous film Watchmen. Actually, the original Latin version of the phrase shows up as graffiti later. And in that article, the quote is from Harvey, probably Dent, a little setup for Two-Face in the DCEU. Lex gives Keith the rigged wheelchair on the table. He's playing some cards. If you look closely at the top right, pretty sure that is the 3 of clubs, a calling card by director of photography Larry Fong, who hides it in many of his films. Enrico de la Vega on Twitter, you challenged me to find it, and while the mail might be screwed, I deliver. Perry White and Clark argue about journalist ethics.
When the planet was founded, it stood for something, Perry.
And so could you if it was 1938, but it's not 1938.
1938 was, of course, Superman's first comic appearance, though in that issue, it was not the Daily Planet yet, it was the Daily Star. Diana has shown the sword of Alexander that cut the Gordian knot, but the angle reflects the background there, Bruce Wayne sneaking up on them, a modern Alexander the Great trying to cut through his own impossible Gordian knots. Onto the Knightmare. Behind Bruce are the even more ruined ruins of Wayne Manor, but the foundation still stands. Bruce, stay strong. The burn mark on the dried out riverbed is the Omega symbol of Darkseid. And taped onto Bruce's gun is a Joker card. We see Superman loyalist troopers who are wearing his sigil. Superman murders Batman. Now, the exact meaning of this and of Flash's visit from the past would have been revealed in the sequel to Justice League, in which Flash would have likely used time travel to warn Batman to avoid Lois's death and prevent Superman from going injustice. Snyder's Justice League recut will likely shed some light on this planned future, or maybe the upcoming Flash movie might, since it seems to be doing all kinds of crazy Flashpoint shit. Very excited for that. Batman tracks Lex's kryptonite shipment from the Gotham port, passing a sign for for Nicholson Dock Company, of course for Jack Nicholson, Burton's Joker. Now, many criticize Batman in this scene for firing deadly machine guns, but one detail I like is how his gun trigger was built over his passenger seat, a customization that must have been added later, suggesting that, like his bat branding, his violent streak is a recent development brought on by a more violent, destructive world thanks to Superman. The Ultimate Edition also includes much more of Clark investigating Batman's violent vigilantism, so when it leads to this confrontation, it's more logically justified and satisfying.
The bat is dead. Bury it.
Tell me. Do you bleed?
I like how Superman ripped off the doors of the Batmobile, and when Batman has to drive it home, you can see he has had to strap these doors back on the roof. Ziri realizes she's being targeted.
Transfers available to Kane Avenue. Please mind your step.
Kane Avenue, of course, for Bob Kane, Batman co-creator. This movie's opening credits for the first time in a Batman film credited other co-creator Bill Finger. Lex gives his regards before the hearing.
Mercy, you go in and make sure no one takes my seat.
Mercy Graves is Lex's bodyguard in the animated series later brought into the comics, but a little devious detail here. He tells her to go inside to save his seat, sacrificing her just to make it seem like he won't be a no-show. Notice throughout the hearing she keeps turning around to look for him. She doesn't know what's going on. It's all by Lex to claim LexCorp was also a victim of the bombing. But when Superman enters, the cameraman on the left behind the senator is a cameo by Zack Snyder himself. He definitely would be among these cameramen trying to get a shot of the Man of Steel. Lex somehow letos a jar of Granny's Peach piss on the dais, and then boom. Lois tries to comfort Superman.
This means something.
Yes, it does, Lois. Because after Man of Steel, the costumers updated for this movie the weave with Kryptonian lettering that translates to a quote by Joseph Campbell, "Where we thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world." Meanwhile, Bruce prepares, making kryptonite smoke grenades, and notice the shells are marked PB, lead, the substance that Superman cannot see through. It lined Keefe's wheelchair bomb. This way, Superman won't be able to see ahead of time what's in those rounds to prepare for them, which is why he's later surprised by the green smoke after catching it later. Mountain Ghost Pa Kent recounts how his valiant efforts to redirect floodwaters ended up drowning the Lang family horses. Horse death. A dark reflection of that winding river description of Superman's sigil. Rivers can bring hope, but they can also destroy. Bruce, meanwhile, recounts his family history to Alfred.
First generation. Made their fortune trading with the French. Pelts and skins. They were hunters.
A little truth he doesn't linger on. The Waynes braved the cold to keep the world warm. But now that Bruce lacks that empathy, Alfred laments.
So falls the house of Wayne.
Oh, Scar's so great. And as Bruce leaves, he walks through this dead, tangled grass, as he did in his dream. But then only in his final shot at the end of the movie, after gaining empathy for his enemy, does he finally walk on a cleared path forward. But here, Bruce armors up for the first time in a bat suit in a movie with no bat sigil on the chest. Because as an authority, you can get away with all kinds of shit when you're unmarked. On a nearby column is graffiti with a Riddler question mark. Another column later is marked Joe Kerr, epitaphs of his former foes. Basically, Batman has drawn him to a graveyard. Lois is taken by Knightmare. The music playing there is Cole Porter's Every Time We Say Goodbye, which Knightmare later sings to Martha Kent.
And every time we say goodbye, you die a little.
Lex tells Superman,
"No man in the sky intervened when I was a boy to deliver me from Daddy's fist and abomination."
But later, this man in the sky does just this for Lex, delivering him from a fist of his own abomination. But listen as Lex brings up Martha.
Martha. You're the mother of a...
This soft lullaby is the same one we heard back when Superman's biological mother, Lara, said goodbye to him as an infant. Lex threatens to burn Martha. Kal-El's biological mother died, also consumed by fire. Now this mom stuff is compelling, but we already have a separate justified conflict between the heroes. And in less is more story logic, one motivation plus one separate motivation doesn't equal a compounded super motivation. Really, it cancels out into unclear motivation, which is a bummer because this fight is beautifully shot, beautifully choreographed. It just has this weird, unnecessary Lex Martha scheme before it that taints it. Still, the fight is epic, inspired from the art in The Dark Knight Returns, including sonic cannons. Notice how those waves blow the puddles away, leaving a slightly drier layer of mud where the blast had hit. And the reason this fight still works is there are some moments where the motivation is not Martha, it's just fear.
Breathe it in. That's fear.
Which is great. Batman's goal is to make his enemy feel the same fear he feels. And Henry Cavill shows that fear really well, the subtlest quiver of his lip. That is why you never CGI over that mouth. Batman nearly kills him, but Superman says the safe word.
Save Martha!
Why did you say that name?
Now, the intention here is that fear is only cured by empathy. But I think most people just read this as, oh, their moms have the same name. And that's what happens when you bring in a separate, somewhat unrelated motivation. Audiences just get overwhelmed and they lose track of what you're trying to say. Meanwhile, Diana explores Lex's email attachment of the Metahuman Project, which he conveniently labels with each of the Justice League members' logos. We see clips of Aquaman, Silas Stone, and Star Labs using a mother box to turn Victor into Cyborg. And when Barry Allen, the Flash, foils the robbery, he leaves the milk hanging in the air for a split second, and it drops about an inch when he re-catches it. Batman sees Martha!
Thermal imaging is showing me 24 hostiles on the 3rd floor. Why don't I drop you off on the 2nd?
Great blocking here. Batman began the movie lurking high above his targets, the devil from the sky. Now he's a demon coming from below, but aspiring upward to do the right thing, which in this case is murder. Justified murder, but murder. But Lex unleashes
Your Doomsday.
the building Doomsday throws Superman into shows up still under construction in Justice League. The fight moves on to Stryker's Island, a prison in the DC comics, but here it's a literal middle ground between Batman's turf and Superman's turf for them to work together. The battle evokes more imagery from The Dark Knight Returns and The Death of Superman, the images of corpsey Superman recharging via sunlight from the comics, as well as, if you look very closely, there's a quick frame, the lightning behind Batman, also famously from the comics. Wonder Woman arrives and completes the DC Trinity in what I think was everyone's favorite moment. And together, the three take down the monster, with Superman making the heartbreaking little stumble on his final takeoff, weakened from having to approach this kryptonite spear. And as in the Death of Superman event, Superman slays the beast and himself, with Christian symbolism returning as this Christ figure sacrifices himself. Now Lex is arrested after communing with Steppenwolf, seeking those 3 mother boxes. He's shaved into his iconic baldy look at Belle Reve Prison, the same prison of the Suicide Squad. His number here is TK421, a nod to Star Wars.
TK421, why aren't you at your post?
But later, randomly, his prison number changes.
Prisoner AC 231940. The warden wants to speak to you, so stand to your feet.
Which is also something that's a nod to Action Comics number 23, released in 1940, Lex Luthor's comic debut. I love this. He uses some wordplay to signal to Batman he knows who he is.
This is how it all caves in. Civilization on the wane, manners out the window.
Caves in Wayne Manor. Got it. Bottom half of the Planet front page reads, Batman befriends Superman near the end. Aww. And Clark's obituary is a well-written article until, if you read it 3/4 of the way through, they clearly gave up and just started repeating the text. But the final shot shows Lois's soil starting to rise, just like the soil before Superman's first flight in Man of Steel. But the detail I like even more, the music kicks into credits with a double percussion, boom, like a heartbeat of a body alive once more. And there you have it. Look, discovering these details might not fix all the issues you have with Batman v Superman, but it does remind us that so much craft was put into this that is worth remembering, just as Snyder unveils his vision for Justice League. Join this discussion on our official Discord server by becoming a patron at patreon.com/newrockstars, and subscribe for breakdowns of all the big DC news from fandom this weekend. Follow me on Instagram, follow New Rockstars, and pray that no one ever looks at you the same way Bruce Wayne looked at his broken porn satellite. You know that's what it was for.